Hello, Astro Bros subscribers. Welcome to another video on the Lunar Mansion series. Today we're going to be talking about the fifth lunar mansion, which is known as Mrigsira, or the Deer Lunar Mansion, and what it means when you have a planet in this nakshatra or lunar mansion. Nakshatra being the word in Vedic astrology. So, if you are new to this topic and don't know what a lunar mansion is, basically a lunar mansion is a unit of astrological time and astronomical time that signifies the amount of degrees in space from our perspective that the moon moves in one day. So the moon has a 27-day orbit, and each day of that orbit it moves 13 and a third degrees. This is expressed in degrees as 13.2 because degrees are in a base 60 system. If that's confusing, just divide 20 by 60 and you get a third. It's actually pretty easy. It takes some getting used to, but that is the best way to measure this system, because if you do it in base 10, you get irrational numbers per day, and that's obviously not good for calculation. Each lunar mansion is 13 and a third degrees. This lunar mansion, known as Mrigsira, it goes from 23 and a third, or 23.2 degrees Taurus, to 6.4 degrees Gemini. And what does it mean when you have a planet here? So this lunar mansion is ruled by Mars. Each lunar mansion has a co-ruler, much in the same way that the signs of Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces have their co-rulers or co-ruler. So each placement has an additional co-ruler that is related to their lunar mansion of the degrees that the planet falls in. So this lunar mansion's co-ruler is Mars. And Mars, again, is the warrior energy. It is the fighter, the combatant, the conqueror. It exists basically if Venus is your desire, and your likes, your pleasures. Mars is the thing that attempts to activate to get those pleasures. So you can think of Venus and Mars as kind of like a dyad, whereas Venus chalks up the desires of the ego, basically, of the self, of the body, and Mars attempts to go out in the world and use any means necessary to get them. Now, Mars is typically a very immoral planet, but the morality of you, like what you're willing to do to get your desired outcome, is largely going to be molded by conjunctions to Mars, the sign Mars is in. Certain signs are a lot more moral, specifically the signs ruled by Moon. Sun and Jupiter and Saturn are far more moral, whereas signs ruled by Venus, the nodes, and to some extent Mercury, are going to basically, Mars is going to try to do whatever it wants in these situations. And this is kind of, unless you've got an aspect from Jupiter or Saturn or Sun or Moon, like one of these very moral foundational planets that are respectable and tend to operate in their particular energies isolated, are very moral, and they aren't going to hurt anybody, and they're focused, they understand the connectivity of things, whereas planets like let's say the nodes or Venus are going to be more in they don't necessarily care what you do to get what you want, because they're primarily animalistic and desirous planets. If you want to get more into that, by the way, you can look into the Vedic astrology system of Rajas, Sattvas, and Tamas energies, and get into that. But this is basically a very immoral, selfish energy. People with this, a lot of placements in this nakshatra, are very desirous, and they are interested in basically, especially in the Taurus part, these people are very interested in controlling their environment and getting outcomes that they want. And it's not necessarily, this energy does not necessarily care if what they want is at the expense of other people. Now, that being said, with Gemini, you get a slightly different energy, but it's similar in that If you remember in my video on Bharani Nakshatra, the second lunar mansion, the one in Aries, it also has obviously the rulership of Aries is Mars, and the rulership of that nakshatra, the co-rulership, is Venus. So when you combine those two energies, you get a sort of Pluto-like energy, which is very destructive. But because that energy is in Aries, and Aries represents yourself, those people tend to get self-destructive. But the people with Taurus, which is again ruled by Venus, and then the nakshatra has the co-ruler of Mars, these people, they get very possessive, and you get kind of an outward expression of Pluto, kind of like in the sign of Scorpio, where the people are concerned with tactical decisions to get the things that they want. So anyway, in the Gemini portion of this, you mix Mercury and Mars energy, and you basically just get Mars energy back. Like I said, there is a formula for this. I'll go over it at some point, but right now, just you can take my word for it or go look for other advice. It's up to you, but I don't really have the energy to go into that topic now. But in the Gemini, sorry, just checking my notes. In the Gemini portion of Mrigsira, you get a person who is linguistically passive aggressive. So at the end of an Earth sign, you always get the Mars co-rulership, because at the end of the Earth sign, this person is trying to get all they can. They're very possessive of their material possessions, because Earth represents material possessions. And Mars, being at the end of the sign, is just trying to accumulate actively a lot of stuff. In the beginning of an air sign like Gemini, air is communication. You get a person who is attempting to get more resources through their speech, and as a result, they don't really see the big picture typically, and they can be very selfish. So early degree Geminis, they get in arguments because they're trying to assert their intelligence, even though getting into arguments is not necessarily the best way to assert your intelligence. Since Gemini also represents thievery, these people can get into thievery quite easily. But in the Taurus part of this, these people can also get into stealing, but not out of greed, but more out of, like, they feel a sense of privation typically. I've known so many people like this in like late degree Taurus placements, like the last 6 or so degrees of Taurus, from like 23 onward to 30 degrees Taurus. I've seen a lot of people engage in theft because they feel deprived, and they have a lot of ups and downs, especially in their childhood, and it affects their character. I've seen a lot of people in the early 6 degrees of Gemini, like early 6-7 degrees of Gemini, have problems with greed, and they're trying to express themselves creatively, which Gemini also represents, but they go about it in a very selfish way, and they end up putting off people around them. I don't want to be super pessimistic. This is just one of those nakshatras that is not necessarily the most positive in its effects. And obviously, if astrology is a predictive method, not all predictions are positive. So, if you're here looking for only positive predictions, you've come to the wrong place, because I call it like I see it. Now, that's not to say there aren't upshots to this nakshatra, this lunar mansion. They tend to be very, like, for instance, if you have Mars here, this is good, because Mars can be selfish, and it also has the added intelligence and material desire. It can be good with Mars. It can be decent with Saturn too, even though Saturn will bring communication delays. Eventually, it will bring a person who's very assertive. Now, if you have something like South Node conjunct Mars here, it can make somebody an acrobat or an elite martial artist. So the symbolism of this nakshatra is the deer. You can think of it as a very natural sort of Neptunian energy. Ceranos, the pagan fertility god, is a very good example of this type of energy. If you don't know who that is, you can look him up. He is basically a Germanic fertility deity that is, if you think about the deer, the male deer specifically is the example. It's not a doe, it's a buck. And for people that live in the city, you might not know what bucks are like, but if you live kind of out in the country, you will know that you do not want to cross a male deer. They're very panicky, they're very scarcity minded, and they will attack just to prove that they can beat you. And these people are often like that. Now, the upshots of this, again, they have a lot of mental and physical energy. They're mentally very fast, but not necessarily very calculated. It's basically like a deer. Like if you ever walk past a male deer, especially in the springtime, like around Gemini time, a Gemini season, these deer will they'll either attack you or they'll bolt on a dime. Like they'll run away really fast. These people can be reactive. They can be gossipers. They tend to have a good heart, but they tend to also be molded by past traumas in a way that can make their existence very difficult to cope with. They deal with, I would say, the main lesson of this nakshatra, this lunar mansion, is to overcome feelings of scarcity and attempt to get to a point in your life where you feel like you have a sense of stability that permeates your entire existence. Like your mode of being is intelligent enough to where you don't need to worry constantly and you can have things without fearing that they're just going to be taken away. And if you lose something, then you can just relax because you can know that it's going to come back to you. So that's a lesson for all nakshatras because again, everybody has all the nakshatras in their chart. But if you have a bunch of planets stacked up here, just know that that is going to be a major lesson in your life. And again, these lessons don't apply to everybody who has this placement or a lot of these placements because, again, every chart is unique. But I would say 95% of the time, if not 90% of the time, these people have these issues, the issues of feeling of scarcity, being reactive, having tempers, having like getting in fights over arguments, like letting arguments escalate into fighting. Or if you have a planet like Saturn or Neptune here, you can have a lot of trouble expressing yourself in writing and in text, and you want to, but eventually you'll be able to. But in the first part of your life, you can have delayed language and or just social awkwardness, social anxiety, and you make friends late if you have Saturn here. Um, so yeah, but again, upsides, a lot of physical energy, a lot of mental energy. If you put an explosive planet like South Node here with Mars, you can get an acrobat or a gymnast or a martial artist, like an MMA fighter, or like a free runner or something, or a skateboarder. If you put North Node Mars here, that you would have a lot of physical energy, but you're going to also have a lot of problems because you're going to be too aggressive. But almost exclusively, if you put North Node and Mars together, unless there's an aspect from Jupiter, these people are going to be extraordinarily aggressive. But that's a video for another topic. So anyway, that was my video on the Mrigsira lunar mansion, the fifth lunar mansion, and it is signified by the deer, and it spans the sign of Taurus and Gemini, and the co-ruler of this nakshatra is Mars, and the combination co-ruler of, again, Venus from Taurus and Mars from the co-ruler is Pluto, and the combination co-ruler from Gemini plus Mars is going to be, again, Mars, but in a more passive aggressive, tactical, calculated, direct way. And anyway, that is my video on the Mrigsira lunar mansion. Tune in next time.